let me introduce you to Gen Z and sport, a sociological perspective, and I will give the floor in a second to Charlotte van Tuykom, researcher and teacher at the Howard School of Applied Sciences in Bruges. As a doctor in sports sociology, Charlotte has a profound interest in the sociological, historical, philosophical, and policy-related component to sports. She converts her passion for research in blogs and podcasts. She's an affiliated lecturer and researcher at Howard University College in Bruges, Belgium. Her current research includes the impact of digital innovation as well as sport promotion for Generation Z or Gen Z. And you can see, you will see it in the slide. You'll find the link to fitfluencer.eu, which is one of her websites. So without further ado, let me leave the floor to Charlotte. And please, a round of applause just to warm up the atmosphere here.
Good morning, everyone. I think we had a fantastic dinner yesterday. At least I had a good night and a very good breakfast, but I think we might use some stretching. So I would like to invite everyone to stand up for a while. Don't worry, I won't give a whole workout. Thank you. Maybe you can stretch your arms a little bit. Always helps. Maybe move your hips a little bit. Yeah, perfect. No, still standing up. Okay, perfect. You may sit down if you are part of Generation Z, or if you think you are part of Generation Z. Okay. So no one is sitting down. Okay, now all the other generations can sit down. Thank you for your cooperation. But I think that exactly proves my point and is our challenge. We all develop products, services, sport events, sport campaigns, whatever, for Generation Z, but almost, or in this case, none of us belongs to this generation, so it's a very difficult generation for us to understand. So that's why I want to share some thoughts with you today. As already mentioned, I'm not a civil servant. I'm not affiliated with a large sports federation or sports organization. I'm only a sports sociologist, but I know a few things about Generation Z, and I like to share them with you this morning. What I will share with you are 7 characteristics of Generation Z, 7 sport personas. Personas are stereotypes of a certain generation, so 7 sporting types, and then 7 strategies on how you can change the behavior of Generation Z. So 7, 7, 7, it's not difficult to remember. Okay, Generation Z. Why is it important to think in generations? What is a generation? Well, why would we care? When you were born, not only affects your attitudes, but also your perceptions, your values, and your behaviors. And there are different generations. Of course, there are a bit blurred lines between these generations. You have the baby boomers. I think most of us are Generation X or Generation Y, the millennials. Then we have this Generation Z, this difficult to target generation who was born between more or less 1995 and 2012. And my children, they are already Generation Alpha. It's already a new generation. And why is it important to think in generations? Well, each of these generations have different societal challenges. We already mentioned it yesterday. Today, the generation or Generation Z, they have to deal with climate change, with recession, with COVID. It's a completely different time than the time when our parents, for instance, were young. Not only different societal challenges, but also different communication devices, different media usage. When I talk with my grandfather and when I talk with him about listening to the radio, then he always tells the story that he had to go to his neighbors to even listen to a radio. I myself, I had a Walkman. don't know if you remember this huge thing, a Walkman, and then I had a Discman. But my children, they only know Spotify. So different media usage, it's a different kind of thinking. Also different iconic products, television, radio, an Apple iPhone, self-driving cars, and so on. But what is so interesting, or what is so typical about this Generation Z? It's the first always-on digital native generation. It's the first generation that spends their entire conscious life using smartphones and social media. They spend a lot of individual time, and I think everybody who has children in this age category knows it today. They spend an awful lot of time on their tablets, on their iPhones, and they also have a very short attention span. Some research says they only have an 8 seconds attention span. It's very short, and well, Generation X had a 12 seconds attention span, so it was short as well. And most of us think of it as a very bad thing, but it might maybe be a good thing as well. Maybe this generation is better at filtering relevant information than we were. A good thing or a bad thing, anyway, something you have to take into account when you target this generation for your sports events, for your sporting activities, and so on. It's also the most diverse generation in history, and they prioritize values around inclusivity, representation, body positivity, LGBTQ+, whatever, they don't care. Everybody is welcome, and everybody can be who they want to be. It's a generation of sensibility. It's also a generation of authenticity. YouTube, TikTok are defining platforms for this generation, but it has to be fun. It's a generation that doesn't take themselves very seriously. It doesn't feel commercialized, but yet it's all commercial, this TikTok and this YouTube. And that's also something we have to take into account when we target this generation in our communication campaigns for sporting activities, sporting events, and so on. And then 7, it's the me is we generation, as we call it. It's a very connected generation, it's a very inclusive generation, but it's also a generation that is very curious and eager to learn, and sometimes we forget this last point. So I would ask you to look at this generation not from a negative point of view, as many people do, but as a generation that has many opportunities. Of course, Generation Z, maybe just a quick summary. It's a generation, it's a powerfully sensible generation. They're globally unified around taking care of one another. And interestingly, they have a language of their own, and it's important to get to know that language. The way they communicate is quirky. It's intentionally lighthearted to combat the heaviness of everyday life. I already talked about COVID, recession, climate change, and so on. So you have to see it in that light. Of course, Generation Z, how can we change their behavior? How can we get this generation from point A to point B? Well, then we have to know what this point A is. And we all often make the mistake that we think that this whole generation is at the same point A. We all target them with one single message, and that's not the good solution. Yesterday we talked about, for instance, using Olympians in school classes. Yeah, we think it's a good idea because we like sports and we follow the Olympic Games and we like these Olympians, but maybe, I don't know, 80% of this classroom, they don't even watch the Olympic Games. So they're not all at the same point A. So if you want to change their behavior, you have to get to know what this point A is. And this generation, they have different thresholds to tackle. For some, it's they are not capable of, for instance, taking part in sport or going to a sport event. Others lack motivation, and still others have no opportunities of doing it. And that's why in our research, we developed 7 personas, so stereotypical persons, stereotypical groups of Generation Z. First one is the fervent sports person. It's the one that really likes to exercise, that breeds sports. Second is the ambitious sports person. For this person, sport is all about self-development, We have a social sports person that is actually not that sport-minded, but who likes the drinks and the talks afterwards. We have a searching sports person for who sport is a way to stay mentally and physically healthy, but doesn't really like sport in itself. Now we have the figure and the cautious sports person, who are people for whom sport is a way to stay in shape, to lose weight. And now we also have a reluctant sports person, and that is a sports person that has, or it's not even a sports person, that's a group of Generation Z that has absolutely nothing to do with sports. So these 7 sports personas, I think now it's very brief, but you can think of some people in this generation group. These 7 sports personas, they're all at a different point A. So if we want to change their behavior, if we want to get them from point A to point B, we have to take into account all these motivators, all these thresholds, the barriers for taking part in sport, for going to sports events, for watching the Olympic Games, and so on. So we have to take this into account. Okay, 7 personas, each different motivators, different barriers. But how can we change their behavior? Are there any strategies? Well, yeah, the answer, of course, is yes. And we use the 7E model. It's not a scientific model. It's not a complex model. It's not even a model I invented myself. But it's a model with 7 words. And each of the words just starts with an E. That's the 7E model. We have some E's that focus on motivating Generation Z. It's engage, encourage, enthuse. We have some E's that focus more on supporting Generation Z. These are enlighten, exemplify, and enable. And now we have one E that is focusing only on the experience. That's the one on the top of the slide. Let's just take a brief look into each of these E's. So how can you enthuse Generation Z? You can do this by awakening their internal motivation, by giving them the taste for engaging in sports or in your sporting event. Try to involve them emotionally, creating empathy, and make sure they can identify with your sport or with your sporting event. The second is how to encourage Generation Z. You can encourage them by applying external motivation, sketching potential benefits, showing them what the advantages are of taking part in sport, going to your sport event or whatever, and giving them the necessary feedback. We often forget to give feedback. Third is how to engage Generation Z. You can do this by pointing to the social motivation and make sure that they notice that a relevant part of their community is already engaging in sports or engaging in going to sports events. Fourth is how to enlighten Generation Z. You can enlighten them by giving them the necessary information, giving them the necessary knowledge and necessary skills to be able to take part in sports, in sporting events, and so on. Fifth, how to exemplify. That you can do by showing as a sports organization that you really mean it, not just with words, but also with deeds, policies, by setting the good example, like the short sporting break yesterday. It's about exemplifying, practice what you preach. Sixth is how to enable Generation Z to take part. You have to make doing sport or going to a sports event or whatever, make that possible, easy, accessible, make sure that there are no limits of taking part. And then seventh, how to experience, that is all about let Generation Z experience that they are doing the good thing, that they made the right choice of participating, of going to your sporting event. And of course, these are 7 E's, and if you match them with these personas, some of the E's will be more important for one persona, and some of the E's, so some of the strategies will be more important for another type of persona. For instance, the experience, you have to focus on experience, okay, for all the personas, but especially for those who are already doing sports or already going to your sporting event, and you can focus more on the experience part. But if I want you to remember one thing about my brief talk today, then this is the slide. I truly believe that sports has a Gen Z opportunity and not a problem. We do a lot of research with this generation, and all almost in all the groups that we do interviews with or focus groups with, they all say, wow, you as researchers, you're one of the first that are looking at our generation from a positive side. Everybody else is so negative, our parents, our teachers. Everybody is negative about our generation, and you were one of the first that look at this generation from a positive side of you. So I hope you can take this message with you. Okay, I talked about 7 characteristics of Generation Z, 7 sport personas, 7 strategies to change their behavior. I know it's a lot of theoretical information. If you want to know more about it, please feel free to contact me. Or we also wrote it down in a huge white paper. It's available in Dutch and in English, and you can download it through the purple link on the slide. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a very inspiring morning.